At what time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Psalm 56, verse 3. In today's gospel lesson from the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus and his disciples had a busy day, talking to people, healing the sick. Then Jesus tells his disciples, get into the boat and go to the other side of the Lake Galilee. Jesus goes up to the mountain to pray. To do his work on earth comes from God and his communion with God. As we discussed this the gospel passage at our last Thursday weekly Vesper intercessory prayer with a small group of parishioners. Pam Stoner, Rita Welch, Judith Ains, and our regulator in this, and we had a good discussion. Diane Lovelace, one of the co-leaders and participant from St. Andrews, told us her insight into this passage. She said getting into the boat to go to the other side of the lake is like we taking the boat of life. Jesus encourages us to a bond voyage. And Jesus knows what's happening in our lives and our journey and the steps we are taking. There are anxious and fearful moments that occurs on our journey of life. However, Jesus meets us where we are. We often do not recognize Jesus and keep worrying and becoming nervous and anxious. When we cry out in fear and pray, Jesus is present and tells us, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. What a comforting message to hear in fearful and anxious situations. For a moment now, think of your situation if you are a resident in Hawaii, with everything being lost for some of the people. Can you imagine the anxiety and fear that they feel about their future and what would happen to them? And today's Old Testament reading, read beautifully by Dorothy, she speaks when Joseph's brothers, Joseph was a 17-year-old boy being sold into slavery with the Ishmaelites, and they took him to Egypt. But God had a beautiful plan for him. But at that very moment when he was sold by his own brothers as a slave, can you imagine the fear he would have felt? Jesus will not leave us alone. We need to understand, and we try to understand, where our journey in life will take us. I came to the US as an international student to study engineering. These were very anxious and fearful days for me at the beginning when I started studying here. I landed in Arizona, Phoenix International Airport. I had no friends, no family. I didn't know anyone in the US. And there was no one at the airport to meet me. I had to get into a taxi and drive to Flagstaff, to the university there. It was a terrifying moment, actually, not knowing anyone whom you could call to help. Even if something happened to me, no one knows where I was. My family in Sri Lanka would not have known. But I knew God's presence was with me. I was anxious, and many times I wondered whether I could make it. There are many times I had to save money. I had a limited budget to finish my education. And many times, to save money, I would skip meals. On Fridays, after a long week, I would treat myself in going to the Dunkin' Donuts store and buying a donut for myself. And I tell you, that was one of the most beautiful donuts I've ever eaten, even now when I think about it. And it was something I look forward to on a Friday. But as I look back, and many years later, I went back with my family to my campus where I studied, and I went to this donut shop that's still there, but is more modernized. And I bought the same glazed donut which I loved. But it didn't taste different from any other donuts I've eaten. But I think God made it special for me at that time. It was a very smooth donut I always eat, and that I'll remember that taste forever. So I know God takes care of us, even the most fearful and anxious times in our lives. Later on, God did allow me to go into graduate school, and God was with me. So however things look bad at the beginning, things will turn out okay. In Joseph's life, he was sold as a slave. Finally, he became the second to Pharaoh in Egypt. God has a plan. But I know it's difficult at the time when we are anxious and fearful to understand that. Today, we have a very distinguished guest in our midst, the Reverend Kathy Crow. She has been a great inspiration to me in my ministry and a good friend. I'm sad to say Kathy had a death in her family. She is now grieving and healing and needs our prayers and support. Please keep Kathy and her family in your prayers. Please say hello to Kathy at the coffee hour and ask any questions you have about the San Jose State University Spartan Pantry. We are going to have the box at the entrance this Sunday and next Sunday, where we are going to collect toilet paper, feminine hygiene products, soap, conditioner, and various other stuff, toothbrushes, toothpaste. If you can contribute towards it, we'll greatly appreciate it. Just to give introduction to Reverend Deacon Kathy Crow's work, she established International Student Residence in August 2017, providing shelter and community that served 40 plus students before the pandemic, and after the pandemic and during the pandemic they had to close it down. She is currently working with the board of directors to increase a host family program, pairing students with seniors or those wishing to open their hearts and homes to needy students. Kathy is an active in emergency crisis response at the university and works with Student Affairs and Counseling Center to provide care and counseling and the basic needs for underserved students. 5 Episcopal parishes in the Santa Clara Deanery partner with Kathy to collect hygiene products for the pantry. Kathy's ministry helps students. I am not aware, if you are aware, there are many students who live in their cars because they cannot afford to pay rent. Students skip meals due to the lack of financial support, and the list can go on. I wish Kathy's campus ministry was there during my studies as a student. Jesus is present with us in our anxious and fears. One of the favorite verses I remember, and I say even today, are the words from Psalm 53. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. Psalm 56, 3. In the jail visits I tell my friends who are inside to say these words when they are anxious or afraid. It helped me through my difficult moments during exams, not knowing whether I'll pass it or not, those courses we do sometimes, not knowing the future. But God was always present with me and took me through most of my challenging and trying moments, these verses. In Matthew's Gospel reading, John Ortsberg authored a book titled, If You Want to Walk on Water, You Got to Get Out of the Boat. If you want to walk on water, you have got to get out of the boat. Peter was on the right track when he got out of the boat into the turbulent sea. Peter was stepping out in faith. Jesus calls us to leave the boat of safety and come to him. We need to have the confidence in Jesus and focus firmly on Jesus. Then we will not sink despite the wind and the waves. We saw in this passage, Peter gets distracted and begins to sink. When Peter fixed his eyes on Jesus, he could walk. Cole Arthur Riley, the writer and creator of Black liturgies, brings an interesting analysis of Matthew 14. He states that in our confusion and anxiety, we begin to develop doubt. In the gospel passage, Peter used the word if, saying, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. If it is you, if. As we study the Gospels, there are only a few times someone addresses Jesus with if. A good example is when Satan tempts Jesus in the wilderness. Jesus tempts Jesus and says to Jesus, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread. And then he says, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, the angels will guard you. Jesus hanging on the cross, people mocked him, saying, if you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. But God is always there. God always is in control. Interesting, Jesus did not scold or chastise Peter for being afraid during the storm. Jesus' question is, why do you doubt my power? Do you think I would not save you? We need to remember that the storms will blow into our lives. Remember that Jesus is present. We are not alone. Jesus, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, is present with us to strengthen us and to help us through the dark patches in our lives. Take courage. Step out in faith, knowing that Jesus is there to protect and guide us through life's storms. Prophet Isaiah says, Prophet Isaiah quotes and says, God has chosen you and has not cast you away. Fear not, I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yes, I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Amen.